Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Today we will be covering a Pear Deck templates and student paced mode. We're going to go over logging into Pear Deck and adjusting the settings in your account. Then we'll move towards previewing the Pear Deck templates and inserting them into Google Slides, as well as showing you how to edit them. Then we'll show you how to launch student paced mode, and then how to edit and access student responses. To access your settings on your Pear Deck account, you would visit peardeck.com and you would click Teacher Login. Then you want to click on the upper right where you see your email and select My Account. Then you want to click on Settings. So this first setting is Classroom Climate. We have it on for ourselves. And what this does is you can decide if you want to check for mood only, feedback only, or mood and feedback. So what mood does is when your students log on to your session, they will be prompted with an initial question on how they are feeling. And then the feedback is towards the end of the session. They will be prompted to either give a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So it's up to you whether you want to turn these on. We like to leave the Classroom Climate on. The Immersive Reader is currently in beta, but as premium account users, you do have access to it. We do recommend turning it on because this is a feature that allows text to be read out loud for students. Now, please note that it will not read text that is from a screenshot or image. It will only read text that is inserted as a text box. We also like to have the Google Classroom setting on. This way you can insert the join code and link directly into your Google Classrooms, making it easier for students to log in. We also recommend turning on the takeaways. So as you can see, after a session, you do get a chance to publish these takeaways. And what these are is a Google Doc that each student receives that has the entire slide deck in a Google Doc, along with their responses. And we'll go over those a little bit more later. And if you turn on your takeaways, you will have to require student logins. And since we are a Google district, you want to make sure to select Google. Please note that when you initially log in to Pear Deck, you may be prompted with some pop-ups asking for permissions if you've never used it before. So now we're going to go ahead and go to Google Slides. And we're going to start a blank presentation since we are going to use the pre-made templates from Pear Deck. If you are logged into the Chrome browser with your MyLUSD account, you will see a little Pear here. So you can click that to launch Pear Deck. If you do not see it, you'll want to go to Add-ons and then Pear Deck for Google Slides and open Add-on. Doing so will launch the Pear Deck menu on the right-hand side. So as you can see, the first thing here is the template library. So to explore and browse the pre-made content that they have readily available, you would click here. And they have their template library. So they have a few templates that are targeted for the beginning of the lesson. And please note that you can use them in different parts of your lesson. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the beginning. It's just Pear Deck's recommendation. So as you can see, these are the ones they would have for the beginning of lesson. And towards the bottom of each preview, it tells you what type of slide it is. And if you want to know more information about that, you would click or hover over this little question mark, and it gives you more information on the type of interactivity that is connected to the template. So here are some templates for during the lesson. And again, you would hover your cursor over the question mark to see more information on the type of slide. Here are some end of lesson templates. Now these are great because they can be used as exit tickets. They also have some templates for critical thinking. And I'll click on a few so that you can see them more closely, as well as social emotional learning. So if you find one that you want to use, you would just click on it. And as you can see, Pear Deck is currently working. And again, if you haven't used Pear Deck before, you may get a pop-up asking you for permissions to give Pear Deck access to Google Slides and such. So as you can see, the template has now been inserted into my Google Slides. And I can click on it to click on the image if I want to change them, as well as the text. So if I want to change anything in the text, I can just go ahead and highlight and delete. Maybe I can say I'm in a good space, and now I see that my text that I added no longer fits, so I might want to extend my text box. So again, to edit the text, you would just click on it, and you can begin hitting your backspace or delete key to delete text, or you can start typing. You can also rearrange the text if I want to move this, but I'm going to go ahead and leave this at the bottom. Now, again, if I want to learn more about what this means, that it's a draggable slide, I would hover my cursor here, and it tells me that students are going to have an opportunity to drag an icon anywhere on the screen. And I will show you what it looks like to students once we built this. Now, you are allowed to edit the slide, but we do recommend that this bottom bar at the bottom here, sometimes it appears blue, sometimes it appears gray. Do not remove that. If you remove that image, as you can see, it has a link here, it will take away the interactivity and students will just view it as a plain slide and will not be able to drag their icon for this one. So as you can see, there are also some templates that are targeted for TK Second. So again, if you want to choose one, if you want to use one, you would click on it, or if you want to see it in more detail. And as you can see, it added it under the slide that I already had. So here I can see that it is a text box and I can edit this. If I decide I don't want that template, I would come over here to the left-hand side of Google Slides, click on the slide to make sure it's highlighted, and then hit your delete or backspace key, and it'll remove it. And as you can see, they also have some categories for the specific subject matter or subject areas. So maybe I'm working on graphing. So I can select that one and insert it. And as you can see, Pear Deck has made it easy for me to identify this is where I need to enter a problem. So I'll click in the text box to make any changes. And according to this is a drawing slide. So students will have a toolbar at the bottom so that they can then draw or add text to this slide once they see it on their view. So maybe I'll have the students graph this equation, and then I want them to explain their answer. So this one, I like it as it is. So I'm just going to leave it alone and not make any edits. So again, there are several templates that Pear Deck has readily available for teachers to use, and they are constantly adding new content. So definitely come back to this Pear Deck menu to see what they've added occasionally, because they do add new templates. And a story map for ELA. Now they currently don't have anything specifically in different language except for here in the world languages. So they do have a few things in Spanish, and this appears to be Chinese. So they are working on expanding what they have available for language. So I'm going to go ahead and add one more template. Maybe I want to choose this one. As you can see, this is a text slide. So what this means is the students will type their responses. So maybe I want this one as the last slide for this slide deck. And maybe instead of I wonder, I'm going to change it to, and again, I can resize this text box just how I would on a regular slide deck, because this is what this is. It's just a Google slide deck. So this will be the prompt for my students. And you can also add some sentence frames or sentence starters, just like this for your students to help them out as well when they compose their answers. So I'm going to go back here. Remember, you can rearrange them if you'd like, but I'm going to leave them as is. I'm going to delete this first slide. And I want to remember to name my slide deck. This way, when it's saved in my Google Drive, I know what it is called. And when we end the sessions, you'll see later how to do all of that. You'll know how to find it in your Pear Deck account. So now we're ready to start the lesson. Now we know that when you present in Google Slides, you come up here and you click this present button. But for Pear Deck, you want to make sure you have this menu here and you want to click this green Start Lesson button. So we're now going to show you how student paced mode works. So you always get this pop-up here if you want to start student pace or instructor pace. Now we're going to go ahead and do student pace, since this will allow students to go through the slide deck at their own pace in their own time. So we're going to select that. A new tab will open up. Pear Deck is working its magic, adding the interactivity. So here's a pop-up telling me about the teacher dashboard, which we're not going to cover today, but there are videos out there for this. I'm going to click Got It so that it goes away. Now, if I want to share this to Google Classroom, I'm going to click Share to Google Classroom. Okay, so when you click Share to Google Classroom, you will get this pop-up, and you'll have this drop-down menu to select the Google Classroom you want to put this in. So I'm going to select my Google Classroom. I'm going to create an assignment and click Go. So let me make this a little bigger. So now what you're seeing is just the Google Classroom screen. So with any assignment in Google Classroom, you need to have a title. So as you can see, Pear Deck inserted the instructions for me already. I can change them if I want, but I'm going to leave them as is. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave it for this one class, but if you want multiple classes to do it, you can select that. For organization purposes with Pear Deck, I would recommend maybe keeping it separate, but it really is up to you and whatever works for you. I'm going to make this a 10-point activity. I am going to give everyone until tomorrow to complete it. And for now, I'm just not going to put a topic. Then I'm going to click Assign. So this is now posted into the Google Classroom. When I click View, I just want to see what it looks like. So here it is here, that there is a new assignment. Students will see it. They'll just click here to go ahead and launch it. So I'm going to go ahead and launch it. Now, that's what's great about Pear Deck, is that you can be the teacher, but you can also be the student by clicking on the link, and that'll give you the student view to see what your students will see. So earlier when we were talking about the account settings, we were talking about the mood. So we had that on. So this is what students will see if you have that mood on. So they're going to get prompted with, how are you feeling today? And remember, this is student paced mode. So the students are able to navigate and go through it at their own pace. So this is a draggable slide. As you can see, if you remember in the teacher version, here it is. I wasn't able to see that little draggable icon. It's just down here, really, really tiny. But here as a student, I can see this is what it looks like. And here are the instructions for students. Students drag the icon. So your students have the ability to click and drag and drop this wherever it is that they are feeling. So maybe I'm going to go ahead and put this here. And when they are ready, they can either use their arrow keys or come down here to the lower left to click to the next slide. So if you recall, this is a drawing slide. If we go back to where we built it, this is what it looks like for the teacher. This is what it looks like for the student. So as you can see, there is a toolbar here for students. They can select the color as well as the tool. It defaults to pencil, but they can choose also a highlighter, a line, or text, and they can also erase. If they come here, they can change the size of the pencil markings, the highlighting, and the lines. So if the student wants to do a line, they can then draw their line here. If they decide they don't like that line or they want to start again, they can do the undo, maybe adjust the sizing, change the color if they'd like. And they would just use their trackpad to draw their line. Okay, and again, they would navigate down here. Now, we did talk about the Immersive Reader. If you did turn it on, students will see an icon down here at the lower right. If they click it, the Immersive Reader would open. They would then be able to select their text preferences, if they need to see the text larger or smaller, if they need to increase the spacing or not. as well as the font. They can see it. They can see the different themes in the background. I personally like the dark theme. You can also have students select different parts of speech to highlight, as well as syllables. Now, again, the students are the ones that control this part of it for the immersive reader. You can always give them some guidelines, but they would have control. So here they would also have the line focus. And this is great because if you have some language learners, they can then translate the text as well. So we're just going to leave it in English for now. And we're going to hit play.
Why? Explain how you got to that answer.
And to go back to the slide, the student would just come up here to the arrow, and they can type their answer here. So again, to show the difference, this is what it looks like for the teacher. So you can see there's no text box there, but the students have a text box here where they can type their answer. And no need to hit submit. As soon as they type, it gets turned in. And again, they would navigate down here. And this is also a text box, so they would type their answer there. And as you can see, this arrow button is now grayed out, which means I am done. Now, technically, I'm not done because I didn't answer this. But that's another thing with Pear Deck is it doesn't really track if they put an answer. So you as a teacher will have to make sure to monitor that, and we'll show you how to do that once we're done with this. So once the student is done, they would just click X and they would exit out. As you can see here, I'm back to the teacher one. If you did not close this tab that opened up, you can then see how students have answered. And if you see that you have more students and you're only seeing one, you can come up here and select grid layout. So you can see the different answers here. You can see what students selected for their mood as well as their name. So that's how you can see we have someone who did answer this one, and I can see that one student did not. Now, let's say you accidentally closed this and you still want to see student responses. To do that, you would go to peardeck.com. Make sure to use teacher login. And then I would come here to the upper left and click sessions. As you can see here, this is the one that is going on right now. It's telling me it's student paste and it's unnamed. So I want to click these three dots here, the more menu, and I want to give this session a name. This way it helps for organization purposes. In those same three dots, I can end the session. Now that means that students will no longer be able to access it. So even though it's in your Google Classroom with the link, if you hit end, your students will click that link and it will not take them to the lesson. So you want to make sure to not click end session until it is the deadline that you gave your students or all students have finished. So I'm going to go ahead and click end this session. Now, as you can see, my menu changed. It was a very quick change. So I have an opportunity to now publish the takeaways. So as we mentioned earlier, these takeaways is a Google Doc. Each student gets one. And in this Google Doc, it is snapshots of each slide that was in the presentation. And if the slide was interactive, it will have a snapshot of their answer right next to it. And what's great with these takeaways is the teacher gets ownership of all of them. So it'll be saved in your drive and you can access them and continue the learning by adding comments, and we'll show you that in a bit. But you can also share it with the parents. Maybe you want the students' parents to see what their students were learning. So you can share it in that sense. And you can also extend the learning, and students only see their own answers. They don't see anybody else's answers. So I'm going to go ahead and click publish or click takeaways so that I can publish them. And again, if you have not done this before, you may get a pop-up prompting you for permission for Pear Deck to access your Google Docs so that it can build these Google Docs for students. Now, please note that takeaways can only be published once per session. So you want to make sure that you do not publish them until every student has finished. Now, if you do accidentally publish them one time and then a few students did not finish, or they were, for whatever reason, not able to access the Pear Deck session, what Pear Deck does is that they also provide you with a blank takeaway template where it just has all of the slides, but no student responses. And this is a doc that you can then make a copy of and share with those students who did not get to complete the session. So I'll go ahead and show you what an example looks like. Here's an example of a takeaway. So as you can see, it adds the student's name at the end of it. It has the title of the session, the presenter's name, and when it was presented. So I mentioned that this takeaway allows for the extension of learning. Each takeaway doc, regardless of the lesson or session, will have this part 1 here with a text box that will allow students to type a summary or their thoughts on the lesson. So this is a way to get students to reflect on what it is they did. So this could be given like as a homework assignment or an extension. It really is up to you. And then part 2 is all the slides and their responses. So if it was a slide that did not have interactivity, it'll just be the slide. However, if there was a slide that required interactivity, it'll have the slide on the left and their response on their right. If they didn't respond, then it'll be blank. So this is probably where I would want to add a comment and say, I see you missed this slide. Maybe I want my student to type the answer in the box, so they can just type their answer right here. However, if they did have a response, you'll see a screen grab of their response right next to the slide. So you can see where the students are. And as you can see, there's also a space under each section where students can add additional notes. So again, it's really up to you how you use this. You can maybe use this as a homework or an extension of the lesson or reflection. So now it's telling me it's ready to publish the takeaways. So I'm going to click Publish Takeaways for this session. And since I do have that setting in my account where I turned on Google Classroom, I can share it to Google Classroom. So just like how I shared the link to join the Pear Deck session, I can share a link for students to access their takeaway directly from the classroom. However, that is not necessary, as once you publish the Pear Deck takeaways, students will receive an email notification that you have shared that Google Doc with them, and it will also be placed in their drive. So again, it really is up to you how you want to do it, if you want to share it directly with Google Classroom or just rely on the email they'll get in their inbox. If you know your students don't really check their email, then you may want to share it to Google Classroom. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. Now, if you ever want to access your takeaways on another time, you want to go to your Google Drive. And once you publish takeaways, you will get a folder titled Pear Deck. And within there, you'll see another folder called Takeaways. And then you'll have all your takeaways in there. So as you can see, I have all the takeaways right here for the people who participated. And here's a blank response one that I was talking about earlier. So the blank response will just have everything except for student answers. And this is one that you can then share with students who missed the presentation for whatever reason. Now, for those of you who want all the responses in one place without having to open a doc after doc after doc, there is an option to export your answers. So you want to click here on these 3 dots and click Export to Spreadsheet. Now, please note that drawings cannot be exported. So if you had any templates that involved drawing, they will not export, but it will show if the student responded to these questions. So as you can see here, it has a timestamp of when it was ended, when the session ended, the name of the student, the email. Now, the draggable will also not import perfectly. It'll just show a percentage. And the drawing slide, if they completed it, it'll say drawing. If they didn't do it, it'll be blank. But if you did have a text slide, their answer will be there. And again, those will also be found in your Google Drive, also in that Pear Deck folder, but it'll be under Exports. Now, please note that your sessions will always be here in Pear Deck, but after 30 days, they will be archived. So if you, for whatever reason, you need to see your session, you would just go into the archive and you'll see all of them here, and you can then hit Restore to access that information. All right, so that's the basic information of Pear Deck pre-made templates and student pace mode.